Hey y'all, it's Bart. Welcome to Soccer for Us, where I am going to talk about the U.S. men's national team's 1-0 win over Honduras in the semifinal of the Concacaf Nations League. This will just be a quick recap of the game, just going through some key moments and stats. And then I'm going to do a quick preview of the opponent we have in the championship, that is Mexico. Before we get going, again, subscribe to Soccer Down Here on whatever podcatcher you are listening right now. That will make sure you get every episode of Soccer for Us, as well as the daily Soccer Down Here show. I did a hit with them on Thursday before the semifinal game. I did one Friday after the Friday morning after the game, and we'll probably do one Monday morning after the championship to take a whole look at what we watched during this Nations League window. The United States men's national team secured a spot in the inaugural Concacaf Nations League championship final with a 1-0 win over Honduras Thursday night, June 3rd, at Empower Field at Mile High in Denver, Colorado. For the first time since November 2019, the United States played a competitive match, and it won. I said at the end of the episode previewing this tournament, and I tweeted it the morning of the game, the only thing that mattered tonight, or the only thing that mattered that night, was to win. And the United States won. Congratulations to Greg Berhalter and company. They advanced to the final. They got a 1-0 win. But I do hope that Berhalter does not take the positive result as a cover-up for some very weak individual performances we saw against Honduras on the night. Now, overall, this team was tested. They struggled. They had to overcome a very stingy and physical Honduras team. And they, overall, they were able to get the job done. I think that if you want to look at massive problems with this team, there weren't really many. I do think that this team does still struggle and transition defense. And there's still a bit of an issue with finishing. And that's not just on Josh Sargent. There were plenty of other players who had chances and failed to convert. But when you look at how the team played Honduras, I think that they were trying, at least, to be proactive. After a shaky 5 minutes, they got their nerves settled and were very much the aggressor in much of the game. And especially the second half, were able to dominate the flow of the game. Now, Honduras in the first half was much more proactive in the game. They were a little bit higher up the field and were more comfortable coming out of a defensive shell to try to challenge the United States and win the ball back. And I do think that disrupted the U.S. a little bit in the first half. I don't think they expected Honduras to be as aggressive defensively. As I mentioned in the preview, Honduras doesn't bunker, but they do sit back and wait for their opportunities to take a ball off your foot or to intercept a bad pass. And what we saw a lot of times was Honduras stepping out of their defensive shape to actually challenge U.S. players, especially higher up the field. And I think that's actually a good thing for the U.S. to encounter that because it reminds them that they're in a real game. And they have to be on their toes and alert, ready to receive a ball, ready to find that next pass. First half ended scoreless, although there were a couple of moments that were quite concerning for the U.S. We'll go through a quick timeline of just some important moments in the first half. In the 10th minute of play, Gio Reyna had a fantastic chance, probably the best chance that the U.S. had until that goal in the 89th minute. Gets a pass from Sergiño Dest, cuts inside the box, makes a couple of guys miss, finds himself pretty much 1v1 with the keeper right at the top of the right side of the 6-yard box, maybe like 8 yards out. He had a defender coming at him, but he was basically in on goal and just couldn't quite find the back post. He tried to find that far post with his right foot and just pulled it wide. Then in the 27th minute, Honduras had their best chance of the afternoon. A free kick taken about 40 yards from goal on the far left side, almost on the sideline. And it swung way back post, very deep. And Zach Steffen, for some reason, comes off his line to come get it. And he is absolutely nowhere close to getting it. Not at all close to getting it in the air. Nothing. He comes out and leaves the goal completely wide open. A header back across goal almost finds the back of the net, but Josh Sargent luckily comes with his mark. He comes with his man who was running in on goal, comes back and wins a header literally right on the goal line. It may have actually been entering the goal. I think it may have been just on the inside of that line, but he saved it. There is VAR. They reviewed it. It was not a goal, and Josh Sargent, saved the U.S. in that moment from going behind a goal on just a cataclysmic error by Zach Steffen. Really bad goalkeeping from him. To credit the U.S., there were a couple of times in this first half especially where the Concacafness elevated quite quickly. A couple minutes into the half, John Brooks got into it with Albert Elise. After that chance for Honduras I just mentioned, the U.S. Gio Reyna kind of got in the face of a Honduras player and caused a fracas. And, John Brooks and company seemed like they were ready to go. And it's very positive for the U.S. and for, if you're a fan, to see if this team can compete in CONCACAF, because they seemed pretty up for that little scrap that CONCACAF can give. Then in the 30th minute, a great ball from Anthony Robinson. He takes it a couple steps inside of the touchline on his left side. He had a pretty decent day on the left side, I will say. Swings a nice ball into Josh Sargent, who rises above two defenders right at like the penalty mark. Gets a header, great on goal, and the Honduras keeper made a great sprawling save to keep it out of the net. I mean, it really was a great save. And U.S. probably went into the halftime, though it was 0-0, very sure that they were the better team. Again, Honduras probably had the best chance just because Zach Steffen decided to just completely vacate his goal. But the U.S. created more chances that were pretty darn good. Halftime 0-0, but U.S. definitely with some more of the chances in the run of play. So we come out of the half, and Honduras starts putting some pressure on us via the counterattack. Again, they were a little bit more happy to sit back and counter. 51st minute, Lozano gets a breakaway in on goal. Serginho Dest keeps him onside. Lozano comes through and is one-on-one with Zach Steffen, and Steffen luckily comes off his line very well, gets a save. I think Dest was going to make up for it. He has been tracking back, but still very bad by Serginho Dest to leave your offside line so out of whack, and Lozano almost made us pay for it. We definitely gave up some big chances in this game. Unfortunately, though, there wasn't a whole lot to do with the match until we scored the goal. It was weird to hear that Greg Berhalter said he felt a goal was coming. U.S. definitely created some chances, definitely created some shots that were on target, but I don't think any of them were really that clear cut where it was like, oh yeah, we're almost there. It took a while for Greg Berhalter to adjust to the game. He didn't make any changes until the 78th minute, where he brought on three guys. He brought on Brendan Aronson for Gio Reyna. Gio had a great match. And Brendan Aronson was quite good when he came on as well. Reggie Cannon came on for Anthony Robinson, switching Serginho Dest to the left side. And Jordan Siebatcheu came on for Josh Sargent in the 78th. After that, again, it just kind of was a struggle for the U.S. to really continually create chances. They were always on the ball. It seemed like always creating pressure, but it wasn't they weren't clear cut. They weren't high XG chances, if you will. 83rd minute, Kellen Acosta comes on for Jackson Newell. I have to say that Jackson, for me, was probably the worst player on the field for the U.S. He looked completely outmatched by the opponent. And then really nothing until the 86th minute, when Tyler Adams gets a yellow card on the bench. Always good when your defensive mid gets a yellow card and he's not even playing, for dissent, for yelling at after a foul committed by Reggie Cannon that he didn't think was a foul. Then in the 89th minute, Theosin Jordan Siebatcheu Pifak scores for the U.S., gives us a 1-0 win. A really well-worked goal. by the U.S., and I think it exhibited some of the problems that the team had throughout the game. John Brooks finally pushing up. I mean, it's the very last minute, so everyone's pushed up. He's inside our own half by like a good 10 yards. He's past the center circle by 5 yards when he gets the ball, I think. Drives forward a little bit, finds Weston McKennie on the right side, and just kind of clips the ball over the back line to McKennie, who heads it down. It bounces by Brendan Aronson, who's running to the near post. Siabachu is running toward the middle of the goal. Brendan Aronson lets it go by him, and Siabachu is right there to head it past the goalkeeper for the 1-0 win. Now, what I loved about this goal was something, again, that we were missing, and that was someone taking the ball from about the halfway line, somewhere in the middle of the field, and really progressing it up the field, forcing a player to have to make a reaction to them. The defenders in this game for Honduras, especially in the second half, were very happy to sit lower. And when that happens, you have to run at them with the ball. You have to dribble at them because you have to force them into making a decision if they're going to hold to their position in the line or if they're going to actually attack you, because you obviously just can't let a guy run right at you with the ball. Even if it's a defender like John Brooks, he's going to take a shot. It's going to be dangerous in theory. So he really forces a decision. John Brooks takes the ball up, and two Honduran defenders collapse on him half-heartedly. But that gives him just enough of that look to see who was available. And McKennie did a good job of coming off of his defender because of Brendan Aronson's run. Brendan Aronson made two great runs on this goal. He runs kind of diagonally from the top of the 18 on the right side to the penalty mark, which forces two defenders to kind of catch him and track him, which allows McKennie to kind of sneak off to the right side. McKennie heads it down. And again, Aronson, it bounces right in front of him, but he smartly knows that he's not in a great spot to put a shot on goal. So he knows that hopefully there's a runner behind him. I think he knows that Siabachu is behind him. And it bounces straight up into Siabachu's head, who just heads it home. A very clinical finish. Very good goal for the U.S. And honestly, the types of goals that we were accustomed to seeing under Berhalter against lesser opponents. And it was nice to see in that moment that the system did produce a result that was kind of more consistent with what it's been trying to do. That's definitely a positional play type of goal. So John Brooks to McKennie, who heads it down to Siabachu, and we get a 1-0 win. U.S. wins 1-0. Really nothing else after that except for Christian Pulisic comes off for Matt Miazga. Very clear Greg Berhalter at the 94th minute at that point in time was just trying to waste time and put another defender on. So the U.S. wins. It was not great, but it was a win, and that's what matters. I'm going to go through some positives and negatives now. Just kind of my thoughts that I had while watching the game. First positive, I have to say, was for CBS Sports. I thought that this coverage was phenomenal. I loved the hour-long pregame show. I loved the talent they had. I think Kate Abdo is such a phenomenally professional, just amazing studio host. I love her. She's great. Really have enjoyed her working with Champions League for the past few years now. Glad she's with CBS for sure. Loved Clint Dempsey. He was a great character to have. And then I thought Charlie Davies and Oguchi Onyewu were actually really great analysts and offered two different perspectives. I really liked it. And it was cool to see these three guys who had played together for a while on the U.S. men's national team be able to laugh, yuck it up, rip on each other, but also give some pretty honest, I felt, analysis of the U.S. team. And I feel like that does lack a little bit with some of the other broadcast networks. And I think that also CBS isn't, yes, they're obviously brought all USMNT talent because that's their English broadcast talent that they're putting out there, but they're not necessarily focused on USMNT, right? They're focused on CONCACAF as a whole. So they are able to be a little bit more critical of the United States because they're trying to, yes, they're being homers. It's going to happen because you've got three USMNT players. You've got Kate Abdo, who's clearly become, a beloved figure in U.S. soccer. And you even got guys like, Nico Cantor and Jenny Chu on the sideline. So like people who are very well-known figures in U.S. soccer. So it makes sense that they're going to lean more toward U.S. bias. But I felt that they were honest in their assessments and weren't afraid to be critical of the team. And I think that's because CBS is looking at this more from a CONCACAF perspective, not necessarily, the U.S. perspective. Loved that from CBS. They were the biggest positive on the night. I thought that it was a phenomenal broadcast. Anyway, that was my first one. I thought my second positive were two players I want to highlight. I thought that Gio Reyna was absolutely great this game. Yes, I would like for him to have scored, absolutely. But you have to trust that with a player like that, eventually these chances just go in because he's creating such good chances, and he's done it for a couple of games in a row now. And it was really good. I thought he was really good. I think he drove the U.S. attack for the most part, created on his own, created with teammates. I was very pleased with Gio Reyna's performance. And then I also thought Serginho Dest was pretty darn good. I got to be honest. I thought attacking-wise, he was really influential in the game. I think that's what I'm looking for in attack is how influential are you? Christian Pulisic, not as much. He looked a little bit tired and heavy. But also I think Christian Pulisic is the guy that they're all keying on. So he's less likely to see the ball, but that opens up time and space for Reyna, for Dest. That was good. I thought our team defending was a little bit better than it was against Switzerland. Obviously, Honduras, not the same level as the opponent. I thought we had some individual breakdowns, but overall, I thought the team defended fairly okay in this match. That needs to improve, but I want to point out that I think it did improve from match to match. Not a whole lot of other positives, just because nothing was a standout. Happy for Jordan Siebatcheu to get his goal. Theosin Jordan Siebatcheu Pifak. What a name. Sergeant P on Twitter, apparently. So great to see him get that goal. And that's really the positive. You won, right? You won. You took a CONCACAF team on and you won. That's a great, great sign. My negatives, I'm going to talk about 3 individual players. First, I said it earlier, Jackson Newell, not good tonight. Not good enough. Was not up for this level of opponent. And this was a big test for him because I think that the question has been against what level of CONCACAF opponent does Jackson Newell become ineffective? And I think we found it. It was this Honduras team. He's been pretty effective against lower level CONCACAF teams. He looked really good against El Salvador and Trinidad. But at the end of the day, this performance from him against Honduras was really bad. He lost the ball in possession a lot. He's a defensive liability. He doesn't really offer a whole lot of bite in the midfield, and we lacked that a lot. And he really didn't seem to connect backline to attack very well on his own. I was very disappointed in him because we need Jackson Newell to be effective because you can't play Tyler Adams every game. He not only for the fact that he's hurt a lot, it seems, but it just doesn't make sense for a guy to play 3 90-minute matches in a World Cup qualifying window. So you need a guy like Jackson Newell to step up and say, yeah, I can do this. And again, maybe his level is below, maybe it's below Honduras, but I don't know if I trust him against Canada. I don't know if I trust him against Jamaica. Definitely don't trust him against Costa Rica and Mexico. So that's 5 teams out of the 8 that you're going to play. Maybe you're more confident with him against whoever qualifies, Curacao or Guatemala, maybe Panama, Trinidad, like that type of thing. But I think this was a really bad showing for Jackson, and that's disappointing because we need someone to be there behind Tyler Adams. And I don't think Kellen Acosta was better. I just think that he does offer more in midfield coverage and defensive cover than Jackson Newell. So honestly, I'd give Jackson like a 3 if I were to go a 1 out of 10 rating. It was not great for me. The other player that it didn't look good was Sebastian Lejet. He didn't see enough of the ball. It didn't seem like he really struggled, I think, to again have any influence in the game, which is something that is sad to say for a guy who, quite honestly, has done really well in the U.S. In a U.S. shirt because he has found ways to make himself known, and that's really sad because you need guys to be influential when they come on the game. You need depth to be. You need depth at every position, and he just didn't show tonight. I don't think he and McKinney work well together. They oftentimes pushed way too high up the field, both of them. They're like on the same line as Sargent and your wingers. And why? Why? Someone has to be filling in the middle, because Jackson Newell wasn't doing it, which is another problem. But it just was so spread out in that middle, and there was no connection. It was very, very concerning. Ewell was 50% on duels. He won 9. It's not awesome. That needs to be better if you're going to be a central midfielder like that. McKinney won the most duels, but he was only at like 50%, but that's okay. He won 16 of them. Gio Reyna won 14. Mark McKenzie won 14. John Brooks won 14. Sergio Dest won 12. Christian Pulisic won 12. So that's pretty decent across the top line like that. But for Ewell to be not in double-digit duels, that's not great. He only had 1 tackle. Like, not great, Ewell had 0 key passes, which maybe not expected from that position, but you would have hoped that he would have had, again, just a little bit more influence on the game. Lejet, though, was a little bit better. He only won 2 duels. He did have 3 key passes and had a 0.25 expected assists, which, sounds like I'm just reading stats, but that stat line for Lejet is fine. He helped create a couple of chances. I just feel like he and McKinney don't work well together, and I'd rather have McKinney being that guy with Yunus Musa behind him, who's that gap between whoever your holding midfielder is and your more advanced midfielder. And that was really a frustrating thing to see throughout the night, and one of the reasons why I felt like we were struggling to really create quality chances in and around the attacking area. And then Greg Berhalter, man, you didn't do anything to convince me that you're the guy for the job. I don't feel like you adapted well tactically to what Honduras was doing. Honduras clearly was playing a little bit more out of their shell. They were more proactive in the game. They were more adventurous in attack, and he didn't really adjust to that. I don't think that his starting 11 was good enough. I think that's the issue, is you chose Jackson Newell and you chose Sebastian Lejet, and they weren't good enough. That's a problem. That's just that's a flat out problem. I will say I liked Robinson and Dest. I thought having those 2 as wing backs was pretty good. So I'm happy with that. But overall, I just felt like Berhalter made some really bad decisions. And one of those was actually 3 of them technically, but he didn't sub until the 78th minute. And it's like, in his presser, he said they just felt a goal coming. And I just didn't see that goal coming the way he did. And even still, at almost 80 minutes, you've got to make a change to somehow influence and impact the match. Yes, the team was clicking well, but sometimes just one change can help. And this is where, as a coach, you have to say, look, this is what we're doing right. You need to do this, but I need you because you do this well. And that's like where Brendan Aronson coming on for Gio Reyna is really good, because he's more likely to make off-ball runs than Gio Reyna. Gio's a little bit more selfish. Brendan's a little bit more team player-esque. Nothing against Gio, because it's just how they play, right? That was helpful. But his subs at 78th minute, 3 of the, you could have made one of those earlier, right? You could have brought Cannon on earlier for Robinson and pushed Dest to the left, because that really would have altered the way that Honduras would have had to defend for a long time, and would have given a much sizable time frame for Dest and Pulisic to work together on the left side, which may have been more lethal. Little things like that he just isn't reacting to, and that's really problematic when you're going to go up in CONCACAF against opponents who are changing their tactics or flipping things up at halftime, or are, again, straight up, honestly, just bunkering, and your team isn't getting the job done. He hasn't adjusted well, and this was a really bad game for him. I'm also going to take him to task for not putting in Yunus Musa. This game needed Yunus Musa. This game needed a guy who could progress the ball upfield on the dribble, which is not something that Jackson Newell does, but would have allowed us to break those lines on the dribble, which means you're beating defenders or at least pulling defenders to you, which means other guys are going to be open. We didn't have that. Honduras was very comfortable. That's a problem. Greg Berhalter, although he said that they felt like there was a goal coming, that's bullshit, to be quite honest, because Honduras was too comfortable in the way they were playing, and the United States was not disorganizing them with the ball the way that Berhalter wants to play. And that's a problem on Berhalter. I know we won. I'm happy with that. Still not convinced about Greg Berhalter. He still has a lot to prove to show me that he is a guy who can actually win games at the top level. You beat Honduras. That's the expected thing to do, right? You got the win, great, but you're expected to beat Honduras. So with that 1-0 win over Honduras in the semifinal, the U.S. will move on to play our old friends, our old rivals, Mexico. That's right, the final will be USA-Mexico, just like Concacaf drew it up. Mexico advances to the championship final on the merit of beating Costa Rica 5-4 in penalties. Mexico looked the better team throughout much of their game against Costa Rica. They dominated possession against Los Ticos, outshot them pretty handily. Costa Rica is definitely not the team that we've seen in the past. I think that the 2014 and 2018 editions of the Costa Rica national team are probably the best they'll ever have. And, they've definitely had a decline since then in both individual player quality and overall player pool quality. But they're still a really good team. They're easily the third best team in CONCACAF, and Mexico dispatched of them in penalty kicks. I think it played out the way that probably we thought it would. I think Costa Rica are still a pretty decent and gritty team, and Mexico really, they probably could have had a goal or two in the run of play. I think their win in the penalty kick shootout was justified because they probably should have won in regulation. Most of the stats heavily favor Mexico, but very specifically, the total passes in this game, this is something that we're going to talk about a little bit later, but Mexico with 506 total passes, passing at an 87.9% accuracy. That's really good, and something the United States is really going to have to combat in their game, because once Mexico gets flowing and is passing the ball, it can be very hard to keep up with that tempo and keep them at bay. They will just drive at you and pass you to death, and it's very difficult. And Costa Rica managed it somewhat okay, but really, Mexico had 13 shots, 4 of those on target. 3 of them were blocked by Costa Rica, as well as saves by the Costa Rican goalkeeper, 4 of them who is not Keylor Navas. So, I thought Mexico was easily the better team. They were unlucky to not score. I thought Costa Rica defended well in their last-ditch defending, but at the end of the day, Mexico deserved their penalty kick shootout win. And now it is USA versus Mexico in the final. I think this presents quite a great piece of evaluation and measurement for Greg Berhalter. I think that we all get so caught up in how this team looks individually, the United States team looks individually, and how we performed in individual matches. But I think this will be a really good test to see how Berhalter has been able to progress and develop this group and his system in the USMNT since that 2019 Gold Cup final. We all remember that final. Mexico was pretty dominant. The United States had a few good moments and stretches of chances, but really Mexico was the much better team, and they got a 1-0 victory against the United States, and they quite dominated the game. It wasn't good for the U.S. Mexico had 20 shots. The United States only had 10. Mexico had 11 steals to the U.S.'s 12. Mexico outpossessed the U.S. 68-42, and they hit more than 434 passes to the United States, only trying 294. Now, these are some stats that I really think are key to measure against that 2019 match to this 2021 Concacaf Nations League final. Part of it is because I don't think this upcoming Gold Cup will have the first team of either team. So even if they do meet in the final, I don't think it's an exact comparison. But the 2017 Gold Cup and the 2019 Gold Cup and the 2021 Concacaf Nations League did feature what at that point in time were probably the manager's best selection of players that they wanted to use. So from July 2019 to June 2021, that's almost 2 years, we're going to see how Greg Berhalter has been able to implement his system, his philosophy, and hopefully developed this team into a better team than he had it at the start of 2019. So here are a couple of keys that I personally am going to be looking for, because I said it in the past episode and I wrote about it for soccerdownhere.net. Yes, winning is the only thing that matters at the end of the day. This is a competitive match. It is a tournament. There is literally a trophy on the line. This is a championship final. So winning is what the ultimate metric is. And if you beat Mexico, then absolutely if you beat Mexico, then you absolutely have shown progress, right? I mean, I don't think that the style really matters. If you beat Mexico after the 2 performances you've had against them, then congrats. You look better. But, there are ways that you can evaluate growth and development that aren't just winning, because, and we've had this conversation, I think, on Twitter a lot, and a lot of people think that Greg Berhalter is not the man for the job and that he has some serious pressure on him in this final. And while I definitely am hesitant to fully embrace Berhalter and throw my confidence behind him, I do think that there are nuances to just saying that, well, if he doesn't beat Mexico, then he shouldn't be the manager. Now, if we still look bad against Mexico, like we did both in that Gold Cup final and that 3-0 loss to them in September of 2019, then I'm absolutely going to be asking questions of Greg Berhalter, because that shows that in the 2 years he's had since then, he hasn't been able to improve this team. Now, I get that COVID wrecked a lot of 2020, but honestly, that means he probably had more time to explain and teach players who, yes, they weren't in camp, but he had more time to just indoctrinate them with his system, show them things, send them clips of things that they do well that he likes in their system, all that kind of stuff that we hear he's been doing, so hasn't really taken account. So here are 3 stats, 3 metrics, if you will, that I'm looking to judge this 2021 final versus the 2019 Gold Cup final. First, is that total shots against. You cannot give up 20 shots to Mexico. That's insane. That's an insanely high number of shots to give up to a team who you're supposed to be on relatively equal footing. I know Mexico is number 11 in the world. The United States is number 20. There's a gap for sure, but it's not that sizable. You should not be giving up 20 shots to Mexico. You shouldn't be giving 20 shots to anyone if the United States. You have to get that closer to 10. The United States has averaged 7.85 shots against since that final in 2019, and that includes that 3-0 loss to Mexico. In fact, I think the most shots they've given up since that time was 15 in that weird Uruguay 1-1 win where we also had 11 shots. So, that was more of a case of both teams were a little loose there. But we've averaged 7.85 shots against per game. Now, I get it. Some of those are against, we have 2 games against Cuba. We have a game against El Salvador in which we won 6-0. We have a game against Trinidad in which we won 7-0. There are definitely some outliers, but if you can get Mexico closer to that 7.85 number than 20, that shows some real growth. You cannot allow them to have really more than 15 shots against you, because that's just going to mean that they're going to, that means they're going to be scoring a goal. It just does. That percentage doesn't work in your favor. Costa Rica held them to 13. Can you get them below 13? I think that's doable for the United States, and I think there are some ways to do that, which brings me to my second stat. Total passes attempted. So against Honduras, we attempted 470 passes with about 87% accuracy. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good clip for the United States. That means that you're possessing the ball pretty well, you are trying to build play, and you're very successfully able to connect with your players. As I mentioned, in that 2019 Gold Cup final, we only attempted 294 passes. And as I said also, Mexico against Costa Rica attempted 506. Now, you've got to bridge that gap. You've got to attempt more passes, because that means mean, obviously you want to complete these passes, so there is that just kind of caveat to all of this. You're still passing at above 85% accuracy. But if you're attempting 350 passes or more, then you are showing that you're controlling yourself, you're controlling the tempo of the game, you're possessing the ball. And that kind of plays into the possession stat, where I mentioned that Mexico is basically at 60-40 in favor of possession. The United States can't concede that against Mexico. And that's also not that passing number and the passing percentage and your total possession percentage. Those are things that Greg Berhalter wants his team to do, right? That's the whole point, is he wants a proactive, possession-based style of play for the U.S. men's national team. Well, you can't tell me that that's what you're playing when you're only possessing the ball at 40% and you're attempting fewer than 300 passes a game. So again, if you're looking at development of a positional style of play, a possession-based style of football from Greg Berhalter and the U.S. men's national team, you need to see the total passes attempted above 350. I'd like to see 400, because that means you're probably possessing the ball more than 45% of the time, and that means that you're hopefully creating chances in the final third because you built from the back to the front through passing. And then the final stat that I'm really looking at is the U.S. takeaways from Mexico. Again, in that final, Michael Bradley was the only man who recorded a steal for the United States, and it was 2. That's problematic. There weren't as many against Honduras. I think we only stole the ball 7 times against Honduras, but that's actually pretty decent considering that Honduras really didn't have progressive passing. They kind of just, got the ball back from us and hit it long. And, steals in your defensive third aren't as important as steals in the middle third and the attacking third. And this stat is very important to Berhalter, who wants to implement a high press and that gegenpressing, where you recover the ball quickly after losing it. So if you're Berhalter, you want to see the steals number higher against Mexico, because that means that your press is working well. And in theory, you're creating more moments of transition for your team, where I think they're pretty good, and also creating more chances in the attacking half. I would like to see closer to 10 steals. I think that 10 might be a lot, but I think if you're at somewhere between 7 to 10, that's a pretty good day defensively for the United States, and that's giving you 7 to 10 chances to quickly counter against a Mexico team that also likes to push numbers forward. So those are 3 stats I'm really looking at in this USA versus Mexico Concacaf Nations League final. And I'm not, again, I want Greg Berhalter to win, but I just want to see that the team is urgently trying to win, because you're not going to win every game. That's just the fate of the United States men's national team. You're certainly not going to win every time that a trophy is on the line against Mexico, because to be quite honest, the past couple editions, it hasn't gone well for us, right? The 2017 Gold Cup that we won didn't have to play Mexico. But the last few finals that we've had to play Mexico in, it hasn't gone well for the U.S. In fact, I think we've only beat them in 2 finals. One of those was 2007 at the Gold Cup, and I think we had one more before that. It's not been great. So Berhalter beating Mexico would be the ultimate metric to say, yes, we have definitely grown under him, but I think that there have to be other ways you look at how did we perform, what did we do better. And those are benchmarks that I think any coach looks at, no matter who the opponent is. You have goals, or you have benchmarks where you say, we want to be at this level, at these numbers, if we want to be successful. I think a lot about college football teams and high school football teams do this a lot, where they have really very specific goals per game and for the year of where they want to be for like defensive takeaways or offensive plays run. So like, I think of a guy like Lane Kiffin, who's the coach at Ole Miss, where he has a number of plays that he wants to run every game. And because in his mind, running a minimum of 65 plays a game for him, I think is the number that he kind of wants to hit. That indicates that they are controlling the tempo very well, and they're getting in an offensive flow. And I feel that same way about possession and passing numbers for the United States, where if you're passing at hopefully 400 or more, that means that you're really building the way that Berhalter wants to build. You're possessing the game, you're controlling the tempo. And that's important, because the past couple games against Mexico, specifically for the United States, and very specifically under Berhalter, we have not controlled the tempo. We have not controlled ourselves very well, and it felt like we were chasing the game. that has to change. And if you look like it's a more evenly fought match, then you can look at Berhalter and this team and go, okay, we see the growth. We're invested in the growth that you can deliver, hopefully even more as we go through World Cup qualifying. But if you look at this USA-Mexico match and the U.S. still looks outclassed, is still struggling to, build out of the back, is still struggling to dispossess Mexico, that spells trouble, both in this game and I think for Berhalter long term, because I don't know if I can be convinced personally that he's the guy for the job. Now, I want to take all this again and just say that at the end of the day, I want to win. I want to beat Mexico, and that's ultimately the best goal. But let's just take a step back and make sure we're evaluating the performance in totality and seeing if we actually developed from the last time we played Mexico in a competitive match. So that is how I'm going to try to look at this match on Monday when I review it. All right, so USA versus Mexico in the Concacaf Nations League final. It's the first ever championship of this tournament. The USA and Mexico playing as it was scripted, as it was written, so it shall be, on Sunday, June 6th. Kickoff time is scheduled on TV, it says 9 o'clock Eastern. I've seen on Twitter more like a 9:30 start. Remember that there is the third place match directly before this, and that match starts at 6:30 Eastern time, 4:30 Mountain time. So probably that match will delay the start of the USA-Mexico match a little bit. So just expect that. Thanks again for listening to this episode of Soccer for Us. Make sure you are subscribed to the Soccer Down Here channel on whichever podcatcher you listen right now. Follow the show at Soccer for Us Pod. I appreciate all the questions from last episode. I will definitely want your questions after the Mexico match, after this final. So be on the lookout for that tweet from me. Again, thanks for listening. I'm Bart. I'm out.